не проводить там выборы, либо же дать возможность этим людям голосовать где-то в других участках. Ну, такие рекомендации Європарламента. И второй вопрос. Президент Порошенко призвал различные страны признать Луганскую Донецкую республики в качестве террористических организаций. Какова позиция Європарламента, когда такое решение может быть принято, а если может быть, то когда? Спасибо.
Okay. In terms of the organization of the elections, first of all, it is a matter that any country or any institution will, first of all, respect the political decision taken by the Ukrainian authorities, and that has been a very clear position of the European Union and the European Parliament. We would not in any way encourage changing of that decision, because that is up to the Ukrainian authorities. I was only referring to the debate on that issue that was very much ongoing when I was last time in July in Kiev. So that was more the reference to the internal discussions which we were hearing at the time in Ukraine. Of course, politically, it would be interesting to find a legal or technical solution that all the Ukrainian nationals can participate in the elections, but we wouldn't like to see that those whom you mentioned in the second question actually prevent the citizens to consume their right, and that is the democratic expression of their will at the national elections. So this is a technical obstacle that might occur on the 26th of October, and of course what would be the way to circumvent them? It's not very simple to organize for anybody, not only the Ukrainian authorities on the regional level or the electoral commissions or whoever is responsible, but anybody else, including the international observers. What you referred in your second question is, of course, the clear position from the Ukrainian president, and I understand that those who represent the separatists and who won't respect the territorial and constitutional order of Ukraine should not in any way be deemed as those who are not only actors of a future solution but adequate interlocutors. And that's why the entire effort of the Ukrainian political and the diplomatic side was very clear in determining who is responsible and who is actually organizing and is behind the Donetsk and Lugansk separatists, and that has been very clearly established that they are not doing it on their own, but that they have been guided by Moscow. So from that point of view, the relevant European Council conclusions as well as the European Parliament resolutions have been more than precise.
The next one that would like to also, yeah, the lady.
National TV station and public radio. Из вашего ответа получается, что вы сомневаетесь, и вы не понимаете нами этих людей, и что действительно российские войска присутствуют на территории Украины. Вот только что, по крайней мере, из этого перевода звучит так.
Unfortunately, I'm not aware what you interpreted what I said, but on the contrary, actually that was my point. My point was just comparing, that's why I said at the beginning, the comparison between what happened in Croatia, our occupied territories, Serbian minority being manipulated, exactly the same pattern. On the contrary, my point was very clear that none of this would have happened if there was no clear linkage and a clear organization coming from Russia. It's very important not to be misunderstood on that issue. Is it clear?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it is in English, but I'm not sure if... Is it okay? Is it clear now?
Простите, просто я не услышал ответа на свой вопрос. Европейский парламент готов признать эти организации террористическими? Европейский парламент готов признать Луганские, Донецкие республики террористическими организациями?
This one you don't. As far as I understand, the problem was that I was not talking into this microphone. That's why you didn't hear me very well. I'm sorry, I was focusing on this one and forgot. This is a technical issue. Just a tiny little second. I just wanted to check with Mr. Apostol if we correctly understood. The description of the Lugansk and Donetsk separatists as terrorist organization is a clear position of the Ukrainian government, which is logical. But when it comes to the resolution of the European Parliament, I don't think this was as defined as Ukrainian government is saying. But of course, our position is very clear. They are not interlocutors. They are people who do not respect the territorial integrity, who have basically taken arms against the legitimate Ukrainian government and therefore are not a partner in any of our discussions and adequately are addressed in all our resolutions.
Okay, please.
That's why I said at the beginning there are many actors on the European side. When we discuss the restrictive measures, as you have seen, the key decisions are taken by the Council, that is to say the Member States, and that's why you needed approval of each of them for a certain restrictive measure to be adopted and then published in the official journal and thus becoming valid. The European Parliament is a political assembly. It's a forum where the people who have been directly elected with the mandate come together and take positions on a number of issues. When we adopt our resolutions, we have sent a strong political message to all of those that these resolutions are addressed. They are basically urbi et orbi resolutions at a certain point of time, summarizing our opinion and our clear political position. Of course, the European Parliament's resolutions are not binding in a legal sense, but they have a strong soft power influence on the policies of the member states, and also they are duly taken into account by the External Action Service of the European Union, which is headed by Madame Ashton, as the key High Representative and the Vice President of the Commission, and also a guideline in a very continuous and intensive dialogue with the relevant commissioners. So you will see Mr. Füle in half an hour. When we discuss Ukraine, he's there in the plenary, and he responds to all the statements of a number of MEPs that take the floor, and therefore, when the Commission is formulating its position and presenting it to the Ukrainian side, they always take into account the position of the European Parliament. And in that sense, I think if one of the institutions was very clearly supporting the Ukrainian cause, if I may say it that way, it has been the European Parliament in the last several months.
You allow me to add just to former Secretary of State. They are directly linked to the current governments as well. So, I mean, not only talking about Mr. Plєнковічь, but Mr. Elmar Brok, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, is directly linked to Angela Merkel, the Chancellor, and so on. So, it explains the range of influence that the Parliament can have. Yeah, the next one that would like Plєнковічь is the one that you will face many times in the following years when you have to deal with the starting time, I would say. You again? Oh, okay, please, the public TV.
Ваше видение и просто, может быть, даже ваш совет Украине и украинцам, и правительству Украины, как...
My position is extremely clear on that. Annexation of Crimea is illegal and illegitimate, and it will not be in any way taken into account in any international law sense that it would be sanctioned as a fait accompli on the European Union side. When it comes to the advice, which you clearly ask me, when you are sitting here, any colleague, any reasonable politician, reasonable man, it's a common sense, would basically refrain from any further victims. I think that the Ukrainians have already paid a very high price in terms of soldiers who have died, in terms of civilians who have died, in terms of destruction that has occurred on your territory, both in cities and the infrastructure. in terms of the humanitarian situations, the refugees, the internally displaced persons. There are a number of consequences which actually influence your economic standing and your financial viability. So it's not only my opinion, but I think shared by everybody here, is to, as soon as possible, cease with the military operations if possible, but at the same time not to enter into a situation where Donetsk and Lugansk region, and now also the Novazovsk area, would become some sort of comparable frozen conflicts as we have seen in the Russian neighborhood elsewhere. And this is clearly a danger. So what I think would be the best is to have the implementation of a plan which would quickly reintegrate these regions and territories into the constitutional order of Ukraine. I can tell you that in Croatia, because this is why I can give you an advice, our territories were occupied in '91. We had many plans to reintegrate them peacefully with the presence of the United Nations, of the OSCE, of the EU monitors, but they were actually reintegrated militarily 4 years later, in '95, and not all of them. In '98, only the last part was reintegrated, but this time with diplomatic means, of the only ever UN successful mission for the reintegration of somebody's territory, which was the Danubian part, Slavonia, etc. So our experience is not, I would say, a short-term solution one, because of many reasons. First of all, in '91, we were completely unprepared for any military activities. Maybe you don't remember, but the bizarre thing at the time former Yugoslavia was that the UN provided embargo on the import of weapons. So on one side you had the Yugoslav army, which was fourth equipped army in Europe at the time, and you had small police or territorial defense forces of Croatia with some sort of illegally provided military equipment. So when I compare that situation, it was very ungrateful from the Croatian point of view, and perhaps respecting the ceasefire was also a way to take time to strengthen the Croatian state and also its defense capabilities. This is where I think we diverge in the comparison to the Ukrainian situation today. But my advice would be to show that the Ukrainian institutions and state functions are strong and effective, but at the same time an appeal for a quick legal reintegration and taking control of the entire territory would be objective, but if possible by peaceful means rather than military means. I think you adequately analyzed the complexity of situation and the pros and cons of the respect for the ceasefire agreement. In terms of recognition, those who are not interlocutors, this is a danger, and I exactly know what you are saying. But at the same time, as I say, being on this side of the table and understanding exactly in which type of situation the Ukrainian government finds itself, it is very difficult for you to expect that the European Union would not support the respect of the ceasefire. That's clear. That is something that no one on this side would say it's unreasonable. And therefore I think that the solution lies in the combination of measures, and that is a further pressure on Moscow. That's why the implementation of these sanctions is important, and they, I'm sure, will actually have an effect, despite of the countermeasures and despite of certain, let's say, signals among some of the member states, because European Union economically has ways both to compensate its exporters, both to find ways of the provision of energy sources. There are ways to do it. So I think this is a principal issue where a strong, firm, clear position vis-à-vis Moscow should be maintained, but at the same time, using the facilities of the OSCE which is present, using the political strength of all the key actors involved, should continue to rapidly create conditions for the reintegration of Donetsk and Luhansk regions into the Ukrainian constitutional order. This is not something that your president or your government can do alone. That is clearly. That's why it is our role to assist you and help you in that, because let's imagine if this was happening in a country which would have been a member of the EU or NATO. The problem is there is no automaticity in the collective security mechanism that applies to your country. This is clear. This is very clear. That was clear also after the NATO summit in Newport, but you saw the messages who were very strong at the same time. So the firmness of the EU position should be also a mechanism that would alleviate and probably speeden up the solution. Okay. Here I will tell you also my personal position, not necessarily in the capacity of the chair of the delegation, because you asked me a wider question. I think, and I was one of those MEPs when the resolutions on Ukraine were drafted, to be written in the European perspective, including membership stays also for Ukraine. I think Article 49 of the treaty is very clear that any European state may apply for membership. And that is something that I fully support. Of course, the times that I evoked about Croatia are now 23 years ago. It's a long time. It's more than half of my life. And it took us 20 years to join the European Union. Very long way. And from our point of view, very unjust in many situations. We were very unhappy in '91 the way that the international community was reacting to aggression against Croatia. Very unhappy. Very similar to what I hear in between the lines of what many of you are saying. But we chose the European way, and despite of all the difficulties, we managed to get this process finished, and also to have a referendum where people directly supported membership. That was in the January of 2012 with a ratio 2-to-1. At the moment, a year after that has passed in our membership, I would say general public is satisfied. There is no dramatic enthusiasm, but there is no also, I would say, a sad disillusionment. I think Croats are taking this novelty as a realistic step, because the moment when we entered in the EU was completely, but really completely different than 10 years ago, when our colleagues from Poland and Czech Republic and Baltic states and others joined. It's not the same atmosphere in Europe. It's not the same economic situation. It's not the same globally situation. And given this changed context for the enlargement, I would say that our, let's say, state of mood in the public is solid and expected. I would be surprised if it was different. It couldn't have been no more critical, no more enthusiastic than it is. And I think that that sense of realism in this 2014 is something that probably applies wider than just the emotions of 4.5 million Croats today. Thank you.
Значит, я хочу сказать о том, что, по всей вероятности, очень сложно найти какие-то четкие рецепты для Украины, даже если это Европейский Союз, что, вероятно, можно продолжить?
One second.
I'm not sure if I understood well. The reforms are oriented towards getting closer to the European Union, or reforms to reintegrate the territories which are not controlled? Is that the question? For the enlargement? For the enlargement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Я сейчас поясню. Дело в том, что вот буквально перед поездкой в Брюссель наше издание и наше ученые Луганска в Киеве на базе Верховной Рады депутатов. Причем это были народные депутаты не от партии Юга, не представители Востока Украины. Это были даже скорее депутаты от свободы, от оппозиционных партий Востока. Что подвигло к этим вещам? Дело в том, что ученые Луганска, они провели очень сложное, очень долгое исследование. И они выясняли, от чего Украина вот стала такой уязвимой и сложной. Они выясняли, почему произошел этот сбой граждан.
So it's both to the enlargement and
Yeah.
inside.
I think I was correct to ask you the clarification because my feeling was that you were actually not only discussing the reforms generally needed to meet the European criteria, such as the political, economic, sectorial reforms, because in that context, your roadmap and the implementation of the association agreement will be so comprehensive that everything that will happen in the years to come will, one way or another, be linked to this association agreement. It's like a political program which is above the party level. It's a direction where you go. That's for sure. But what you referred to is a little bit more wider context, how to use, let's say, the logic of the regional policy of the European Union implemented in the case of Ukraine, given the diversity of the regions, because you are aware that more than 33% of the European Union budget goes to the cohesion policy that was so far conducted by Commissioner Hahn, an Austrian commissioner, who becomes Füle in 2 months. So Johannes Hahn will be one of the most relevant actors for Ukrainian and the relationship with Ukraine in the next years. And it's perhaps very good that he understands in detail the finalité and the logic of the regional policy. For instance, Yugoslavia also fell apart because of the bad system of the regional redistribution, because Slovenia and Croatia felt that our tourist money was financing development of Serbia and Kosovo and Bosnia, etc., and nothing was left to us. So the concept of the EU in bringing the level of development of various regions in the European Union from different stages, various indexes, to going above 75%, aiming to 90%, is actually at the heart of the functioning of this organization. We are in the Union where we would like to see gradual development of all of our parts in a sort of equilibrated manner. But for that takes time, for that takes very solid development policies, it takes very sound budget policies, and in the case of the new member states and countries such as Ukraine, it takes a lot of added value of direct grants from the EU budget, but also from extra, very, I would say, reasonable loans from the institutions such as European Investment Bank and the EBRD, because remember that the EIB has very, very targeted programs, and I was last year in the Budgets Committee where we actually allocated much more money for the Eastern neighborhood policy, and especially for Ukraine, where this most reliable bank in the world can come in and complement the funds which are being given as the assistance to Ukraine. So that's why I said, and here, for instance, Mr. Balash, I'm not sure if you met him, is actually in charge of trying to adequately use the whole palette, whole catalog of financial instruments that can help the development of Ukraine. So the regional development remains perhaps in this European sense the biggest and most attractive part of the solution for the problem, and not simply saying, Western Europe wants to go west, and Eastern Europe or some Eastern part of the people in Eastern Ukraine would like to remain somewhere else. That's not the solution. Solution is the country stays together and chooses the way of development which enables everybody to live in Ukraine adequately.
But do you think that
We also like to have a Polish model of development. That's why Madame Plienkowska is becoming a commissioner. I think Poland has been the most successful country which is, I think Poland is more exemplary to Ukraine because of the size, etc., than smaller countries than we are, and the regional also organization. They have been most effective to plastically see the value added of the European funds in the direct development of regions, infrastructure, economy, competitiveness, transport, etc. But since I know Mr. Füle, and you need to at least have 10 minutes from here to the Commission,